Hello, and welcome to the Home Screen Podcast. This is episode 9. Today I'm joined by Ben again.
Hello.
Today, this may be a bit rambly, but we've just watched Supersonic, the Oasis documentary. For me, it's my first time watching it. For Ben, he's seen it many, many times.
50th at least.
So, yeah, we're just going to discuss that, really, our thoughts on that, as it's recently had a re-release in IMAX cinemas today. But I'm sure the conversation will delve and we'll just talk about what we've been watching. So, yeah, for people that don't know, Supersonic is a documentary about the rise, and not so much the fall of Oasis. It's more about their journey as a band to getting to the peak of their stardom. And then it kind of talks about and alludes to the troubles that follow afterwards. But I quite like the way it ends. I'd say, what do you think of it? But obviously, you're a massive fan. So I'll phrase it more as a fan, how do you think it does justice to the true story of them and their rise to the point where they're at their pinnacle?
Yeah, I think it takes it from the inception of Oasis, sort of like their foundation, sort of how they get the big break.
Yeah.
It comes straight from the horse's mouth, like it's interviews from the band themselves, and then like people close to the band, straight up to the 2 nights that they do at Nebworth, which a lot of people sort of say is like, I think is the height of the power, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, this is all sort of happening in the 90s, like sort of like the mid to late 90s. So it's like, yeah, like you're saying, it sort of charts their meteoric rise to the top, to being at one point the biggest band in England, if not the world.
Well, it felt like the world, especially towards the end. When it said about them breaking into the States and doing international tours around Japan and stuff.
Yeah, but it's like you said, it's basically just like, it's like, concert footage spliced with this 2-hour-long interview with band members, sort of like unearthing sort of like everything that happened backstage kind of thing.
Yeah, I really liked how it was pieced together. Obviously, it's all found footage plus interviews and things. It's kind of cool because I was thinking I asked you, who's filming this? And it is just collated found footage from the whole thing, I guess, of like when they're in the recording studios, like laying down the first 2 albums. I guess that was more like their roadies and just friends and family, just like rolling just camcorders.
Yeah, I like the way it's sort of like a lot of the bits, like certain bits are sort of like spliced together, like sort of very scrapbooky.
Yeah,
which is quite cool as well.
Yeah, it had quite a unique editing style. And considering this came out in 2016,
yep.
I like how it didn't feel like a very modernly edited piece. It felt like
felt very sort of like mixed media, like traditional media, like loads of like films from cameras, sort of rolling as it was like showing like stills and stuff.
Yeah, like if you told me that this was edited and released in the early to mid 2000s, I would probably presume that would be right, because it felt like it was very much keeping in that style. I think that's probably because of how it was shot. It's all camcorder footage.
I found out recently it's an A24 film.
Is it really?
I'm looking as we speak.
Did they distribute it?
It was distributed in the UK by Entertainment One and Lawton, and in the US it was distributed by A24.
That's really interesting.
So I don't know if it is, because like normally you in the like now you see the logo at the start and you're like, we're in for a good film here kind of thing. But I'd have thought it would never really be as the sort of thing that they'd sort of have a hand in. I guess it's normally like, I don't know.
Yeah, well, because obviously A24 started as a publisher before they started really like doing their own films.
Is that a little bit like Blumhouse?
Sort of. I can't remember the name of it. Was it Breakers?
Yeah, I think it was Spring Breakers.
Yes.
Was like one of the first like.
Spring Break. Yeah, that was it. Yeah. So obviously they started off in like 2013 distributing and films before they started getting into publishing. It is really interesting, and it's cool to see them picking up documentaries. You don't tend to see A24 getting involved a lot with documentaries. Obviously they're getting they're huge now. They get at the point now where they're insanely respectable and Oscar-winning studio.
I'm gonna say, you look at their sort of like their rap sheet, so to speak. Even of the past, like 2013 they were started, so like just over 10 years. You like Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is like that did win Oscars, didn't it?
Yeah, crazy amounts of stuff.
Civil War is, I think, the most recent. I've still not seen that. Like Uncut Gems on Netflix, Hereditary.
Everything that Arias has done and Robert Eggers. Insane amounts.
Uncut Gems has been on my list for I don't know how long, because I think it was sort of, people were almost shocked to see Sandler in a serious role.
I think it was Dan that phrased it like this to me, it's the most panic attack inducing film. Like the way it's edited to just be so everything's just on top of each other, and there's just you can't catch a break as a viewer, just like he can't catch a break. It just feels like
even more than Whiplash.
Similar, but it just feels like a suffocating film in terms of like everyone's talking over each other. It's deliberately like just feels chaotic, and like the sound design and stuff.
Like,
and it's just
anxiety inducing.
Yes, really anxiety inducing, purposefully done. It feels like when you're watching Uncut Gems, it really feels like you're trying to like grasp onto something of like what's happening in the scene. Okay, he's the main character. Now he's then in whip pan, he's being shouted at across the shop, and then someone pulls a gun, and
there's sort of like investment in the film, because I feel like what you're describing I sort of had similarly with, again, it wasn't really recently, but I remember it. You ever watched Gone Girl with Ben Affleck and I cannot remember her name.
Rosamund Pike.
There you go. Obviously, it's quite a shocking film at points.
Yeah.
But just generally feeling quite uneasy about everything going on. You know, even the point where, you know, like quite early on when he's having when Ben Affleck's character is having a conversation with I think it's his fling.
Yeah.
Like even stuff like that's making you sort of feel like a little bit uneasy. Like we don't know the full picture here yet, and I think that's what keeps you sort of hooked.
I think it's very different, similar in some regards, quite different to Uncut Gems in terms of it's a very clinical film. Gone Girl is like obviously it's a David Fincher film. It feels very precise and methodical, and I feel like A24 and the Safdies and the Uncut Gems is a lot more sort of like messy is the wrong word, but it's like intentionally
chaotic.
Yeah, very very controlled chaos.
A little bit like like some of the episodes of The Bear were shot.
Yes.
Sort of like the layers upon layers upon layers of noise.
Yeah, very intentionally edited to make you feel on like a bit on edge.
They've got so many. Midsummer's another one that's like A24 film that very, very glad that I watched it.
Don't watch it again.
I don't think, you know, it's Saturday night, it's like, oh, there's nothing on TV.
Yeah.
You know, we're not getting out of the pub, we can't be bothered. Oh, do you want to just sit in and watch a film? Yeah, what do you fancy? Oh, you know what's a really good watch? Midsummer. Like, it's you know, it sits with me with, you know, like something like Saltburn, which again, I know we spoke of last time. It's happy that I've ticked it off the list. Let's just put it in a box and not speak about it again.
But I think that definitely I guess that did my film degree, but then I never really was like a quote cinephile or film fan really until COVID hit. Like I watched like a lot of the classics, and I watched like what are the big blockbusters, Marvel, Star Wars, etc. And then really from like 2020 onwards, when I started getting into Letterboxd and that whole culture of like Letterboxd and Mubi and understanding what A24 is and really getting into like film Twitter. Yeah, and then when I started like, I think watching films like that really is like a really good way to feel like gives like your creative spark like a bit of a kickstart. Different films for different occasions. I think it's so easy just to sit down and just watch like junk food cinema of just like, oh, let's watch like Rebel Moon on Netflix, that sort of stuff. Whereas A24 really like scratches an itch of like you watch it and you feel like, just to see if you like feel motivated, sort of like undersells it, but it's just like watching like really well handled cinema like that makes you really appreciate like what it can do as an art form.
I think it's very, very. You're in an era now where there's a lot of reboots and sequels and remakes.
Yeah.
It's very, very hard, I think, to go to the cinema, be excited enough to, you know, to buy a ticket, sit and watch a film, and have it stick with you. I don't think I can remember the last time that I watched a film in this, you know, in the cinema at least, like as it's out, and come out and was like, oh, Jesus. Like I think the last time I can remember was probably Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
Like we drove, because I think I just started driving at the time, and I was like, you know, I'll drive kind of thing. We were driving back, and it's like in the car, and like barely anyone said a word.
Because it has an impact.
It was like really like I don't think there was, you know, I'm like, I'll put my music on really loud. It's probably Oasis, but like there was barely any music on. We were just driving back from, I think it was the Trafford Centre, just in silence. I was like, what the f*** have I just watched?
Yeah.
It's the last 20 minutes for me. The entire film, you're wondering why Einstein has just completely blown off Strauss like that. Just the way he delivers that line is like, you know, about the calculations, and it could set off a chain reaction that could destroy the world. And he's like, I believe we did it. And you're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah, goosebump inducing.
And just the fact that like, that's what I'll always just love about films is that like...
That's what it's about, man. That's what it's about.
Yeah. So why do you think that this came to be in 2016? Is there a story behind why all these years later they decided to put it together. Was there kind of like amends in the relationship, and they were like, right, let's sit down and document this?
I think it was coming. I think it was coming up to the 25th anniversary of the release of Definitely Maybe, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. Okay.
I've got the book, which is I'm gesturing to it now. There you go. The book is like all of the transcripts of the interviews that they did. So it's essentially just an extended cut of the movie, but you have to read it.
Okay.
So there's like, like it takes out the best bits, I would say.
Yeah.
But then like if you read the book, there's like a lot more in certain aspects. I think right at the start they approached, I think it's the guy who does Amy, the Amy Winehouse, the original Amy Winehouse documentary, not the new one. I think it's the same people that did that. They had the idea of putting together something like this to sort of like, oh, we want, this is a really interesting story, we want to tell it. Obviously the two parties of like Liam and Noel were like asked, and they were both on board. I think Liam was sort of like a little bit more hesitant. I think he actually says like, a couple of questions. Who's going to be the hero here and who's going to be the villain? Kind of thing, because you know how cinema can frame.
Yeah, and it felt like a very balanced. First of all, it's a very well constructed documentary. I think it was very well balanced in showing like both of their sides. It's probably weighted more towards Noel being the narrator than Liam. I think Liam being probably more of like an on-screen presence in the doc, whereas it's more Noel's perspective and reasoning and talking about like why he took a short break from the band in America and stuff for a few weeks. And
yeah, I think it's like it does a very, very good job of towing the line between truth and what sort of fabricated, I guess. I mean, obviously I don't think an awful lot is, but I think it actually says in the film, it's crazy how you can have the same experience but feel so differently about it.
Yeah,
and it does a very, very good job of just trying to tell the story from the people that lived it.
Yeah.
And you sort of get a sense, because like watching it, I never really got obviously you have your own personal preferences. Never really thought, like you said, it was leaning more towards this is all Noel's doing, or this is all Liam, and like you can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
But it wasn't really made by just one of them. It was the two of them together.
Yeah, which I really like. Like it feels really well balanced, and also the input from the band members and their mum and like the roadies and stuff. Like it was nice hearing them chiming in as well, talking about how they felt in different moments.
Yeah, so there wasn't an awful lot from like Tony McCarroll, for example, because he gets ousted quite quickly as the drummer. I think someone's like he wasn't consistent from one bar to the next, never mind one song or one day to the next.
It did feel like towards the end, slight criticism, or I guess it's the artistic choice. It did feel like it kind of like rushed through to like the last few things. It basically like showed their build up, and then the last, I guess, like 10-15 minutes, like a lot of stuff happened really quickly, almost like in montage form, being like oh well, Tony took us to court, but then I guess that was almost montage of them being like, this is when it stopped being fun, and it basically was we're in the hands of the industry of people clawing, of like we're in like news headlines and politicians talking about us. Tony took us to court, and this. It felt like it kind of it's hop, skipped, and jumped over a lot of that, but also it's because it was wrapping up.
That I think was, I'd have said, was where the band sort of like became a different beast. It moved over from this sort of like touring the country with your mates, having a good time, sex, drugs, rock and roll, all that stuff. All the same, like, we're rock stars, to a business.
Yeah.
And it became a money making scheme, because your boys in the big offices are going to want to milk you for everything that you're worth, I guess.
That was really highlighted towards the end when they were talking about the build up to, what was the big concert called again?
Nebworth.
Nebworth. Saying how there was like 4% of the British population registered to get tickets. It was like 2 million people, 4 million people, whatever it was.
Quarter of a million per night, and they sold the first one in minutes, and then they were like, oh, you can do 3 nights here.
Yeah.
And then I think they were like, oh, they for the first time apparently were backing down, sort of like, I wouldn't say it's fear. I thought it was just sort of like, what, why?
Yeah.
And in hindsight, they could have, like, I think somebody actually says in hindsight they could do a week.
Yeah.
Of it, sell it out for a full week.
I think I can't remember how they phrased it, but they were basically saying how they felt like, is this getting too big? Is this getting away from us? And so they decided to stick with the 2 nights. The concert footage, the found footage throughout is great. Like the camcorders, like being in the room with them talking to camera, but a lot of it is just like conversations and stuff. But especially of the concerts is really just like eye-opening little like glimpse into like a window into the past of like we were saying of, oh, like back in the day it would have been great having concerts with no phones and stuff, but like it's so cool to see like just a mass of people just all jumping up and down, and like the crowd literally feeling so alive of being in the moment of a gig like that outside in the 90s is so cool.
Yeah, I think without sounding too hipster, sort of, it's almost like you were born in the wrong era. Like we went to a last week King's Leon concert at the Co-op Live, and then the day after at Castleville Ball we saw Jungle in particular. There was a DJ on beforehand for like an hour, and then it came off, and you know you could see them all setting up, and they were pulling off the big. They have like a big like sign that has like the Jungle logo on it and stuff.
Yeah.
Smoke machines come on, start coming out. You know, lights sort of like come on a little bit, and everyone's like cheering and clapping. The moment you even hear the first whiff of Busy Yearning, which is what they come out to, like really, really well-known song.
Everyone's phones are out.
Everyone's phones are out. Everyone's phones are in the air. You know, everyone's cheering and having a good time. It's just like, I think I took a couple of videos, but like I'm pretty sure in every video that I've like got or every picture that I've got, like the foreground is just like 8 people with their hands stuck in their eye with the phones, and it's like you want to capture that because it's you know it's happening there, and you kind of want to remember it in some way. But like it'd be great to sort of have an event or something like that where you don't get that, and like you were saying, it's sort of like to look at like footage like that and it's just people just like, you know, no phones, just vibes, as people say, is crazy.
It's so cool, and like, I totally get that people wanting to like capture the moment, but also I think that's what makes other like forms of entertainment so special, like theatre or like orchestral concerts. Like no phones. It's like you're there to experience that moment. People might get photos like before or in the interval or after, but like it really feels like it's quite preserved. Whereas modern concerts, and we could rant about concerts for ages, but and like ticket prices and stuff. But yeah, it's just so cool and just like interesting just to see, because I've seen like archival footage before, like of Live Aid of Queen.
Oh yeah,
and stuff.
yeah.
And that I've like obviously no phones and stuff, but to see it in this context. And them commenting on it, saying that it really feels like this is one of the last big gigs before the internet like broke and it became like the common man had access to it and things, and phones have started to become the norm.
Yeah, like particularly like say the scene where they go to America and, you know, accidentally discover crystal meth. And it leads to Noel basically just storming out, you know, grabbing the tour manager and being like, "Give me all the money in the float," and he actually says in the book that she like purposely gives him enough money that he can like zip to somewhere else in the States, but not enough to actually get him home, kind of thing. But do you see it like, you know, they're like trying to track down where he's gone. Like in this era, like, you know, if we nip out somewhere and you just disappear, and it's like, oh, I'm just give Porter a ring. You know, I can just like, you know, jump on Instagram, or, you know, like the accessibility is there, and the fact that they sort of had to sort of like do a bit of sleuthing.
Yeah.
So I think she checks him out like at the hotel, gets his bill, and then realizes that he's rang like I think it's like a 514 number, which is San Francisco,
like,
and then she starts putting the pieces together.
Yeah.
You know, he had like a previous relationship there or something, and that's sort of how they spot him. And it's crazy watching a film that sort of takes place in that era, and then realizing how different your life is, like how life is now.
Yeah, literally.
Which is crazy. But
yeah, if you haven't seen Supersonic, obviously recommend checking it out.
Unless you're a Blur fan.
It was just so cool because I just felt like I was kind of oblivious to the backstory of Oasis.
You came in almost completely blind. I think I threw that at you, sort of like, you know, come around and watch a film. I was like, nah, this is you know, had a re-release. Have you seen that? And you're like, nah, but I'd be keen. And I'm like, I love music stuff. You know, anything sort of music related. Like Bohemian Rhapsody, Supersonic, the Amy Winehouse documentary. Like the new ones on the list as well. But anything sort of like anything music related, you know, film, TV, is really like, I just enjoy that sort of stuff.
It feels like it's always been a bit of like a blind spot on my radar of just like biopics. I've seen like obviously like the big biopics like Bohemian Rhapsody and such, but music documentaries I've not seen a ton of, and this is obviously a really good one to start with, and I'm looking forward to watching more akin to this. I thought it was really cool to see, just like showing how you can really like craft a narrative with found footage, and having people do interviews after the fact is just
almost like 20 years after the fact.
Yeah,
you know,
and talking at it with like, but still being able to remember really like granular details and how they were feeling and who said what on the night, like 20 years later, and then like patching it together with found footage is just like fair play to the editor, whoever edited this. Was like incredible feat to be trawling through like hours and days and weeks and months of footage to piece this together. And I know that there'll be grabbing the footage of what they're talking about. Like, oh, they're talking about this gig, right? Well, we'll get the footage from that gig and we'll do a 3-4 minute segment. But it's still a mammoth task to pull it together.
It's not all like actual footage as well. Like, at parts, it's just stills.
Yeah.
And the way that like the stills are stitched together to make it look like they're sort of like being annotated and chucked on a table. There's a scene where they're in like they talk about like when they go into Amsterdam for the overnight gig and they end up getting
on the ferry.
Yeah,
And there's no footage
of
that, so it's just narration and clever, like almost like doodles and stuff.
someone talking about like running through the casino bit, and you can see like casino chips sort of like falling sort of onto the table, like one of the
the safety.
like the
pamphlets.
safety information pamphlets, and it's sort of like being annotated and drawn as if like it's like Liam clobbering someone. I think it's just like generally like, I mean, I'm biased because I really like Oasis as a band. Shot very well, like quite balanced storytelling. I think at times very interesting, very poignant. But yeah, as a first timer, and sort of you've hit sort of like where I was with it, I guess.
Yeah, I was definitely impressed, and like it obviously there is some like quite hard hitting emotional parts in it, but also just in general and them and their characters, like some really like the humor's really well done as well. I don't think that's even like the filmmaker having to like edit it or do it in like a certain funny way. It's just capturing how they naturally are, and then just in the way it's presented is just like a really like naturalistic, really good documentary.
Yeah, they're just you can tell like they're just bonkers.
Yeah,
with each
they're
other.
just showing, and it's a really clear way of just showing how they are. It's not like performative or they're very selective. I don't know what the editing process was like, but it just feels like this is a really raw look at this is what these humans are like. Yeah, fascinating.
How do we wrap it up?
Bye.
Let's wrap it up.
Wrap it up, baby. But yeah, thanks for listening to this episode of the Host Grade podcast. If you enjoyed it, please check out our social media. Give us a follow on Spotify. Give us a rating if you want to. Thanks for listening. We'll hopefully see you next time. Bye.